Good morning, all. I hope everyone is doing well and enjoying sunshine and learning very hard. I would like with this recording to explain supply from every kind of direction. Supply is just as important as demand, and we need to understand what happens with supply whenever anything changes. Right, so this is part of chapter 2. Demand is already recorded. And now I want to do the supply curve. The role of the market is still very important. The market is the place where the buyers and the sellers come together. So if you go to the vegetable market very early every day, you'll see all the farmers coming there with their products, and there are a lot of buyers who want to buy from the farmers and then sell the products to the private people. So the farmer and the buyer there on the market decides or tries to agree on a price according to how much supply of, let's say, potatoes there are. And the buyer will say, okay, I know the demand of potatoes will be more or less this. They agree on a price, and that price will be the equilibrium price for this day. So price has a function. It says actually, if prices are very high, it says either that demand is high or that supply is low, or both. It also has a rationing function, which means actually simply that if the price is high, only a few people will be able to buy this product. The price mechanism is demand and supply, where they intersect, and that is the equilibrium point where everyone at that moment is satisfied. They are satisfied with the price and the amount, so they don't want to change anything about this. Right. So in the case of demand, it was actually easy. We are consumers, so we are used to the idea of demand. Supply, though, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the supplier now. Let's say you're a farmer, you want to supply stuff to the market, and you're going to do this. Supply then will be determined according to the law of supply. In this case, the higher the price, the higher the supplier will be willing to supply. You would like to supply a lot if price is high, but the lower the price, the lower the supply is going to be. And this is called a positive relationship. Okay, so what is important in supply? Well, first thing is your price, because your price is going to determine whether there are going to be suppliers. And then second, of course, your product. And your products could be goods or services. And then we need the suppliers, and this could be farmers, or this could be factory owners, whatever suppliers we have, mines, we've got a lot of suppliers. And then, the same with demand, we said effective demand is where demand is covered by money. You have the ability to pay for your demand. So demand and ability to pay must be, that will be demand. Same with supply. If you are willing and you are able to sell or supply, then you are a supplier, and you will count your supply as part of the market supply. We are also going to measure supply in a period of time. So we're going to talk about weeks or months or quarter or a year. And remember the Latin word of ceteris paribus. At first, we are only going to change price. Nothing else is going to change. And we'll see what the changes in price is doing to the supply. Right? This is a positive relationship because when the price is low, supply is going to be low. When price is high, supply is going to be high. And the one causes the other. The price will cause the amount of supply. And this is a continuous relationship because for every let's say rand, for 5 rand, you will get so many potatoes, you will supply so many potatoes. For 6 rand, you will supply so many potatoes. So the supply is a continuous relationship. It depends on exactly what the demand is going to be. Right, we're going to talk about the determinants of supply, and then I'm going to explain them graph by graph. Right, the first thing is, of course, the cost of production. If the price of your production is high, you'll have to decide whether the price of the product is worthwhile. So you're going to look at all your costs of production, and if it becomes very high suddenly, you will have to rethink about your supply. So we'll look at the cost of production. When costs goes up or costs goes down, what's going to happen with supply? The government can impose taxes on your production or on your goods. So in this case, we're going to talk about taxes on production. The third one is subsidies. If the government would like the market to produce more of a specific good, maybe it's essential good or maybe it's a merit good, the government will be willing to give subsidies to make sure that the production or the supply increases. Technological progress has to do with everything that's changing and it's making things easier. We are using more machinery, more computers, there's more research done. So this will also have an effect on your supply output. And then if you are a producer of different goods and some of your goods prices goes up and some of them prices goes down, if possible, you could adjust your production to the goods with the high prices. And then we'll look at time. Sometimes it's not possible to change your supply. Sometimes it is possible. And of course, the weather has shown us this year that it has a very large effect on supply. Right, so the first graph is simply the supply curve. So when only price changes, then only we will move along the supply curve. So make sure that you remember that nothing else changes but only your price, and then you will move along your supply curve. If you are supplying Q1 and price goes down to P2, if possible, you are going to try to supply less. You're going to try to supply Q2 and so forth. So if the price is very low, the suppliers will not be willing to supply a lot of this product. We're also now going to look at the movement of the supply curves. You will remember that we did this also for demand curves. So in this case, in the movement of the supply curve, the price of the product is not changing, but something else is changing. So I will show you with every graph how this works. All right. So if the cost of production falls, right, something happens and maybe the laborers are working more productive or whatever the reason is, maybe you could get your seed from a cheaper supplier, whatever, then the supply could increase. The supplier will decide, okay, the price doesn't matter now anymore. I was willing to supply Q1 at price 1, but now my costs are falling. So I could supply more. And then if I supply Q2 at the same price, my revenue will increase. So the supplier is willing to supply more at this stage. In the next case, if the product that is supplied here is of high value. It could be essential product. It could be simply a merit good. If you remember the definition of a merit good, this is something that's good for you when you are using it as well as everyone around you. So the government would like to increase, let's say, education. So then they subsidize. They give subsidies to schools. If they want to increase the supply of broccoli or green beans because it's good for your brain, they could subsidize the farmer by either giving him seed for cheaper or giving him fertilizer. This will then increase supply without the price of the product changing. So the price didn't change, but the subsidy is making the costs for the farmer lower. So in the same as the previous slide, your supply curve is going to move to the right, and the supplier is willing to, instead of Q1, now supply Q2, which is good for the market. Right, when costs on production starts increasing, the supplier could see this is going to get a little bit more expensive now to produce, and he would start producing less. But because maybe there is another product he could produce rather than this product. The increase in cost could be because of government imposing tax on the production of a good. Demerit goods, for example, you remember demerit goods? It's a good that you are using, it's bad for you as well as the people around you. So the government could start taxing production so that in the first place there is less on the market. So they could tax the production. We also will talk about taxing the products, where the government taxes alcohol and cigarettes. In this case, we're talking about taxing of production, and this will increase the cost of the supplier. And for that reason, he will supply less, or all the suppliers in the country will supply less. The supply curve is moving to the left because of higher production costs. There could be another reason for costs on production increasing, and that could be simply wages increasing or energy prices increasing. Diesel costs are definitely increasing a lot these days, and all suppliers then will be willing to supply less of these goods. So remember now, the basic reason for the supply curve moving to the left is when your costs increases. When your supply curve moved to the right, it would have been because your costs decreased. Technological progress will normally be able to increase productivity. So with any new machinery, any new technology, it is possible to increase supply. So if we have better machines, sewing machines in a clothing factory, productivity could increase. So the prices of the clothes don't need to change, but supply could move to the right. The same with farmers. There are people sitting in laboratories doing research on seed and on fertilizer, and every year the seed that are available to the farmers are better, sometimes with less bugs in it. Fertilizer can become better and maybe cheaper. Then it is easy and it's possible to increase supply without the product's price changing, remember? So let's look at broccoli. Broccoli's price did not change, but because of good seed and fertilizer, the farmers in South Africa will be able to supply at a higher point. So technology progress is good for supply. So if you are a producer of more than one good, it is also a good thing to look at the prices and profitability of your other products to see whether maybe you should change to another product. So if this farmer is planting cabbage and cauliflower, so he's supplying cabbage and cauliflower, and then he realizes, but cauliflower's price is going up, and cabbage, people don't like cabbage at all, so cabbage price is going down. This farmer could, when he harvested his last cabbages, he could start planting cauliflower instead of cabbage. And if all farmers do that, total supply of cauliflower will increase in the country. In this case, we have the same table that we had with the demand curve. There are the reasons for shifts in the supply curve. Go through them and go back in this presentation, and you will remember and you will realize every change has a reason. And in the end, you will realize that all the changes are very logical. Right, so what could make the supplier supply more? Is it easy to suddenly decide to supply a lot more because of the price? Not always. So the cost, if it's a very expensive thing to supply, the change in supplying more is not as easy. It's maybe not possible. If you are supplying a very expensive thing, it could be not possible to move your supply curve to the right. The supply will also depend on the size and nature of a business. If you are working on your own, or it's a niche market, it's not so easy to suddenly increase the supply. And large businesses, they could increase supply, but they will need capacity. If there's a part of the factory that's not used at the moment, they have more capacity, they could be able to supply more. If not, if all the factories are used 100% at capacity, then increase in supply is not possible. And then there are time periods. Some products, it's simply impossible to suddenly increase supply. If the price of apples goes up, it's not that easy to increase your supply because you need to plant your trees and wait for 6-7 years before you can harvest apples. The mining sector has also a very long period between finding the minerals and then making all the plans until you could mine this mineral. Other determinants, of course, could be fresh goods, milk, stuff that's perishable. It's not as easy to simply supply more of this. If you need more milk, you will need first more cows with calves. So it's not that easy to increase supply. And then some manufacturers could change from one product to another without very high costs. At the moment, the factories in Ukraine, there's one that has been a beer factory, and at the moment they are producing Molotov cocktails to use as a weapon in the war. So some factories could change production from one product to another, but they'll have to try and see what's happening in the future, which is, of course, very difficult. So now we're going to look at the market equilibrium, there where price is agreed on. Right. So there's my demand and my supply curve for Coca-Cola. The market is in equilibrium where price is P1 and quantity is Q1. Everybody's happy. The supplier feels happy with the price and with the quantity, and the consumer is happy. So at this moment, nothing needs to change. But then life happens. And suddenly it's a very hot summer. Everybody wants to drink more Coke. And now before the price of Coke increasing, the demand curve will move to the right. And then, because of this, it's now possible for the retail store to charge more for the Coke. Right, so equilibrium was at E, and now the equilibrium is E2. At E2, where the price is now 18 Rand for a 2 liter, and the quantity demanded has gone up with 20 from 100 to 120. Right, so the first thing you have to think of when they ask what will happen to the demand curve is it will move to the right. What will happen then with equilibrium is equilibrium will increase to E2, and that will have the effect of an increase in price and an increase in demand. And suddenly it's a very hot summer, everybody wants to drink more Coke, and now before the price of Coke increasing, the demand curve will move to the right. And then, because of this, it's now possible for the retail store to charge more for the Coke. Right, so equilibrium was at E, and now the equilibrium is E2. At E2, where the price is now 18 Rand for a 2 liter, and the quantity demanded has gone up with 20 from 100 to 120. Right, so the first thing you have to think of when they ask what will happen to the demand curve is it will move to the right. What will happen then with equilibrium is equilibrium will increase to E2, and that will have the effect of an increase in price and an increase in demand. Right, so now let's look at complement products. If the price of wetsuits, we talked about wetsuits and surfboards, those two are very good complement products, because if you want to surf in Cape Town, you will need a wetsuit, and apparently people use wetsuits everywhere. Right, so if demand for surfboards, if the price for wetsuits decreases, becomes cheaper. Now more people will be able to buy wetsuits. And if you've borrowed your friend's surfboard, but you've got your own wetsuit now, because it was cheaper, then maybe you would also try to buy a new surfboard. So with the price going down for wetsuits, the demand for surfboards could increase. So the yellow line is the demand curve for surfboards, and the new equilibrium is now at E2, which means now surfboards price can go up and the quantity demanded will also go up. Now there's another little bit more complicated one. If advertising is done, it will cost the company more money. Advertising costs money. But with this, the demand could go up. Demand for mountain bikes. So if Pluto mountain bike store, they start advertising the latest new mountain bikes, they could increase, the demand could move to the right, and your supply for mountain bikes will move to the left for a little while because of the higher costs of advertising. I'm explaining this stuff because these are the kind of questions they will ask you in your multiple choice questions in economics. Right,